Okay, colonial sharpshooters enter the Revolutionary War.
I thought it was sharp.
Oh,
Sharpshooter.
Yeah.
Rylan, what's a present day name for sharpshooter? What's a sharpshooter?
I don't know.
Ryan? A sniper. Okay, a sniper. And so basically what happened in the fall of 1777, approximately 500 American riflemen were being trained to help the American cause in the Revolutionary War. Okay? And by the fall of 1777, approximately 500 American riflemen were being trained to help the American cause in the Revolutionary War. Now, as Brian said, a sharpshooter was basically an early name for a sniper. And these sharpshooters that they train are going to be a huge asset to the Continental Army because of their remarkable accuracy using the Kentucky long rifle. Okay? So these sharpshooters that are being trained are going to be a huge asset to the Continental Army because of their remarkable accuracy using what was known as the Kentucky long rifle. Now, does anybody know what type of rifles that the regular Army were using? They weren't using Kentucky long rifles. What were they using? Muskets. Okay, there's a big difference between a musket and a rifle in this time. Okay, and I'm going to tell you the difference. A lot of times, if you look at these battles in the Revolutionary War, you see a lot of what they call volley firing. And that's what they do when you have muskets. Because a musket has a round barrel, but the inside of the barrel is smooth. And obviously the ball, we call them bullets now, but at that time they were balls, the balls have to be smaller than the barrel, okay, or otherwise it wouldn't go through. So as the gun is fired, as the musket's fired, that ball bounces all the way around in that barrel, all the way down the barrel, and when it comes out, the accuracy is not great. So muskets are not meant to shoot specifically at something and hit that thing. They're used for volley fire. They know it's going to hit something because in those days, basically, you had troops marching against each other in formation. So you watch movies and stuff where the commander will go, "Mac ready, aim, fire," and they all fire at the same time and a bunch of people fall down. Then the other one does the same thing. That's called volley fire. And the idea with these muskets isn't to hit anybody particular, to hit into the group and cause damage. Okay, the Kentucky long rifle is much different. The barrel is much longer, and it's obviously smaller at the end of the barrel than it is at the start of the barrel. And these barrels inside are grooved. They have grooves in them. So when that bullet or ball goes down the grooves, it goes in a circle. It doesn't go ba 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 ba. It goes in a circle. And as it goes down the barrel, smaller and smaller and smaller, it's going to come out and it's going to be way more accurate. And these guns were used to shoot at individual targets. So that's the difference between a musket and a Kentucky long rifle. Now, these skilled snipers or sharpshooters at the time that were trained could hit a specific enemy soldier anywhere from 100 to 300 yards with these Kentucky long rifles, and they did not have scopes on them like we see today, right? They're open sight rifles. So these guys were very proficient. And probably one of the Continental Army's most skilled sniper was a 20-year-old Pennsylvania backwoodsman by the name of Timothy Murphy, another unsung hero that nobody knows about in the American Revolution. So one of the Continental Army's most skilled snipers was 20-year-old Pennsylvania backwoodsman by the name of Timothy Murphy. Timothy Murphy. Now what's a backwoodsman, Elise?
Like a hunter or someone who spends a lot of time like in the woods.
Yeah, someone that lives in the woods, grows up in the woods, probably does a lot of hunting and hiking and very proficient in survival, okay, very good at shooting, okay, very good at taking care of themselves in backwoods. Now, we've got all these rules of war, right? What's our first rule of war we learned? That we cease fighting in the winter. Well, another rule of war at this time is that officers were not to be targeted during battle and shot. Okay? It was an unwritten law that officers were not to be picked out of a battle and targeted and shot. Now these officers, you got to think about this, officers are required through their military training to lead their men into battle. So often they're at the front of the fight at this time and easy targets. And the general rule was that you were not allowed to shoot officers because that would leave leaderless armies fighting each other, which would turn into chaos. That was kind of the written rule at that time, is that officers were clothed differently, were not to be targeted. Okay? So again, another rule of war at the time was, and it was an unwritten law, it wasn't written down anywhere, it was a gentleman's agreement, that officers would not be picked out of a battle and targeted, because these officers were required through their military training to lead their men into battle, and that often put the officers in the most vulnerable positions during a fight. And the idea was to avoid leaderless armies at war and the disarray that would cause for both sides in battle. Now, the shooting of officers at the time was deemed a war crime and also an ungentlemanly act. It's just something you didn't do, okay? And what could happen to somebody for committing a war crime? You could be put to death. So this was kind of a big deal. It seems kind of silly, I'm sure, to you, because you're trying to win these battles. It'd be like saying you can't guard the best basketball player on the court, or you cannot guard the receiver because he's the leader. It just seems kind of silly when you're trying to win. But the fact is that was the rule. Well, despite this rule, the Americans' most valued targets during war were these officers. These sharpshooters were trained to shoot officers. That's what they were trained to do, which was really not looked on very good by the British. They saw it as a war crime and also a very ungentlemanly act, but they didn't care. Now, there's an old saying, if you can't beat them, join them. So what do you think that the British started to do after their officers were being picked off in battle? They started training their own sharpshooters, and that rule of war went away. That rule of war went away. So because of the continued violation of the code by the colonists, the British Army began to train their own snipers for the same purpose. Okay? Any questions on that? Okay, that'll take us to our next subtopic, which is a blown opportunity for the British to end the Revolutionary War. A blown opportunity by the British to end the Revolutionary War. A blown opportunity by the British to end the Revolutionary War. Now, who is the best of the American sharpshooters? Timothy Murphy. The man who was considered the best for the British at sharpshooting was Captain Patrick Ferguson. Captain Patrick Ferguson was considered, the top sharpshooter for the British. Captain Patrick Ferguson. Now, he was a Scottish officer in the British Army, so he's from Scotland. He was a Scottish officer in the British Army and was considered the best of the best concerning British sharpshooters. Well, he's going to have a golden opportunity to end the Revolutionary War, and that happens in September of 1777. In September of 1777, he's going to have a chance to end the Revolutionary War. Now, what happened in September of 1777 is colonial forces were engaging British forces in Pennsylvania at a battle called the Battle of Brandywine. So, again, in September of 1777, there's a battle going on between colonial forces and British forces, and the battle's going on in Pennsylvania, and it's called the Battle of Brandywine. Now, Captain Ferguson has got a few men with him, and they're basically scouting ahead of the British main army who are on the march. And that's not uncommon. So the British Army's on the march, and they have people out in front to kind of see what they're marching into, right? And Captain Ferguson and a few other men are out in front scouting ahead so that they knew what they were going to run into. Well, as Captain Ferguson is on this, what they call a routine reconnaissance mission, where your reconnaissance means that you're checking things out. They have that in the Army today. You have reconnaissance groups.
How do you
Well,
spell
reconnaissance,
Yes.
RECONNAISSANCE. Getting this down, Mako?
Yeah.
RECONNAISSANCE. Well, as Captain Ferguson is on this reconnaissance mission, trying to figure out what's ahead of the British Army, I'll be darned, through the trees does he not spot an American general. He sees an American general through the trees, and the American general obviously doesn't see him. Anybody want to guess who this American general was? George Washington. So as Captain Ferguson is on his routine reconnaissance mission, he suddenly spots an American general through some trees, and little did Ferguson know that this colonial general was none other than George Washington. Well, Ferguson puts General Washington dead in his sights, and he's the best of the best, and all of a sudden Washington turns his back to him. Washington has no idea he's even there. Just so happens he's got the sights on him, and just before he gets ready to pull the trigger, Washington turns his back to him. Well, Ferguson considers himself a man of honor, and he refuses to take a shot at someone with their back to him. He's a man of honor. I'm not going to shoot this guy in the back. The old Westerns, that was a bad thing. If you shot somebody in the back, you were the coward of the century. Didn't shoot somebody in the back. And Washington's on his horse, and his horse turns, and all of a sudden, Washington's back is in Ferguson's sights. And because he considers himself a man of honor, he refuses to take the shot that could have ended the war for the British. Okay? Now, he's not done though. He's still got him there, so what's he going to do instead of shoot him? He's going to capture him. He's going to take him prisoner of war. That's his next plan. So his plan goes from shooting this American general, who he does not know who it is, I don't think, at the point. He then makes a decision to try to take the American general prisoner of war, but he fails in that attempt as well. So, kind of a little cliche here, but I think it's a good one. So, as a result of this story I've just told you, Captain Patrick Ferguson's legacy as a sharpshooter will be defined by the shot he did not take. Okay? So Captain Patrick Ferguson's legacy as a sharpshooter will be defined by the shot he did not take. Could have ended the war right there, yep.
It's kind of like the American colonies, like they were destined to win.
Yeah.
It's just like,
They had Ryland's right, they had so many chances to lose and just hung in there and hung in there. And again, a lot of these unsung heroes that we've told you about have made the difference, okay? And Timothy Murphy's going to make the difference here in just a minute, okay? That'll take us to the Battle of Saratoga. The Battle of Saratoga. On October 17th of 1777, on October 17th of 1777, 7,000 British soldiers are stationed in New York, and they're preparing for a major battle that they think will end the Revolutionary War for the British. On October 17th, 1777, 7,000 British soldiers are stationed in New York, and they are preparing for a major battle that they believe could settle the Revolutionary War once and for all. And this battle is going to be known as the Battle of Saratoga. And if the British win this battle at Saratoga, the Revolutionary War is going to be over. And as Ryland said, these British are just one big victory away from making this thing history. And they just can't get it. So they believe if they win this battle at Saratoga, the Revolutionary War is going to be over. Now, the man that will lead British soldiers into battle will be General Simon Fraser. General Simon Fraser will lead the British into battle at Saratoga against the American Continental Army. So leading his soldiers into battle is British General Simon Fraser. Now, again, if you compare this to a sporting event, the British would certainly be the favorite. Okay, the New England Patriots are playing the Atlanta Falcons in the Super Bowl. And we're going to call it the Battle of Saratoga. Okay, the Patriots are favored. Okay, but we're kind of putting this in different perspective. Well, the man who's going to make the difference in this battle is Widowmaker Timothy Murphy. Widowmaker, that's what the British called him. Widowmaker Timothy Murphy. Makes widows. He's been given specific orders. What are his orders? Anybody want to guess what Timothy Murphy's orders are, Ryland? To shoot General Simon Fraser. That's his target. Believing that if he takes out Fraser, the British Army will be in disarray and it will lead to an American victory at Saratoga. So Widowmaker Timothy Murphy has been given his orders, take Simon Fraser down. Now, as the battle begins, Murphy is about 300 yards away from Fraser, who is clearly visible leading the British troops. Murphy is about 300 yards away from Fraser. Now, he's an excellent shot, but 300 yards is a stretch. It's a long ways with a Kentucky long rifle with no scope, okay? Now, this battle takes place in what we call forested land. It's not out in the open. There's a lot of trees. And Murphy realizes his best opportunity, his best shot, will be from up in a tree. So he makes his way up into a tree and takes careful aim looking for General Simon Fraser. So this battle is fought in a forested area. Murphy believes he can better be served in an elevated position, so he climbs up into a tree, probably uses a tree branch as a rest, and finds Simon Fraser and puts his sights on him. With a single shot, Murphy takes Fraser out, who was rallying the British troops very well at the time. The British were doing very well against the American army until Timothy Murphy took Fraser out with a single shot. Now, can you imagine if you're counting on Tom Brady in the Super Bowl against the Atlanta Falcons last year, and all of a sudden the Patriots are kicking your butt, and all of a sudden Brady runs down the sideline and somebody, Timothy Murphy, number 75 of the Falcons, his job is to take Brady out, and he hits him late on the sideline and knocks him out of the game. Do you think the Patriots have any chance at all of winning that game? No. Because the team is in shock, because their leader has been knocked out of the game, and they don't rally well. That's what happened to the British. They were absolutely in shock from this public assassination, basically, of their leader. It's a huge blow to British morale. And once their beloved general fell, this relentless attack that they were putting onto the Americans simply faltered. Okay? And the Americans started to getting the upper hand. The British forces were forced to retreat to defensive positions. And by the end of the day, the Continental Army wins at Saratoga. All probably because of the efforts of Timothy Murphy, who took out Simon Fraser early in the battle when the British were winning. Now, how many of those redcoats fought at Saratoga? About 7,000. Between that battle and a week later, 6,000 redcoats surrendered to the Continental Army, which was about, at the time, 25% of the British forces in America. So this victory at Saratoga was huge, because not only did they win, they also took 25% of the entire British Army captive. Big blow to Britain. Now, Saratoga really, we talked about the Americans kind of being on the defensive and that whatnot, but Saratoga becomes the turning point of the war for the Americans. Okay, we're going to turn things around here, and we're not going to be near as vulnerable, and we're going to be a lot more confident in victory in the American Revolution after this great victory at Saratoga, in which we took 6,000 redcoats prisoner. And who was the main cog that allowed Saratoga to happen? Timothy Murphy. These are all these people you have not ever heard of that have made a huge, huge difference in the Revolution. Okay, that'll take us to a cold winter at Valley Forge for the Continental Army. And I'm sure you've heard about Valley Forge in your elementary history classes and such and whatever. A cold winter at Valley Forge for the Continental Army. So tell me, Ms. Caballero, from your elementary and junior high days, what do you know about Valley Forge? Tell me everything you know about Valley Forge. You gotta know something about it.
I probably do.
You probably do, but you probably don't.
Like, I don't know what it is.
You know, what's Valley? Nobody knows, what's Valley Forge? Nobody, you guys don't know what Valley Forge is? What kind of a damn education have you gotten here?
It's been a while.
Valley Forge, I can't even believe it. Valley Forge, okay, well you're gonna know a lot about it in a minute. Really, nobody, come on, McKenna, you know something about it. Nobody knows one thing about Valley Forge. John, I was amazed you didn't know something.
They almost all died.
Who did?
The Continental Army?
Why are they almost dying? See no more, do you think? Okay, it's winter time, so what's happening is the war's kind of going on hold. Okay, we'll see what you know. Okay, less than 2 months after the American victory at Saratoga, a bitter winter settles in on the American colonies. One of the worst winters they had ever had comes about. And of course the war goes into stalemate because it's wintertime, and they do follow these rules to a point. Okay? So, less than 2 months after the American victory at Saratoga, a bitter winter settles in on the American colonies. Now, what General Washington did is he took his Continental Army and they settled in for the winter just 20 miles northwest of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. So General Washington takes his Continental Army and he settles them in for the winter just 20 miles northwest